we're going to be kind of talking like about genre and stuff, but they're going to be cross-genre type things. Kind of like where each of the genres come from. If anybody checked out the thing already, I have a little history lesson in here. I guess it's very much based on like you know my personal experience with seeing how the scene has changed and grown over the years, but then also as a ghost producer, um, I've produced a lot of different music for a lot of different things, and I've had to do a lot of different genres. So I just kind of like have been in the ring with a lot of different stuff, and what I produce nowadays is nowhere, um, nowhere near what I used to do for my ghost production stuff. There's some stuff like say like my house music. That's kind of close to what I used to make. A lot of the sounds that I was putting out into the world back in 2014, 2015, for like bass house and all that other shit. But that was all kind of in the back end. So, all right. So there's a ton of stuff. Um, but of course, it'll all be subjective. So, apply it the way you see it fit. There's a lot of stuff that can be applied to everything. So, it's really about kind of translating that knowledge and applying it to something else. So, when you're thinking about pitch, envelope, timbre, for that matter, thanks for the follow. That is applicable to every different type of sound, including leads, chords, physical modeling, drum sound design, which is physical modeling, but also doesn't require physical modeling synths. So we're actually not going to be doing any physical modeling like synths until 201. So don't worry about that. Okay, so pitch. This is where you want to go and design the sound. So if you're designing a sound around, bass octave range, it's going to be around C0 to C2. I say C2 because you can also design a mid bass and then put it up, a couple octaves and then stack a sub under it. So I talk about layering stuff at the end of the guide here. And we're also going to be talking about that with the music today as well. So next point is the envelope. So this is going to be something that's very sound specific. So you're going to see a lot of the envelope shapes. I'm sure you already saw that. Were exactly the same thing. And so you can change that. You can make a respace and then make it a donk envelope, but now it's a restonk. So now you're giving like hybrid qualities to like these very specific sounds. And also you can just take any of these sounds that you make to that same exact mentality and even pitch it up a few octaves and then turn it into a lead. In my experience, basses that are pitched up can sound really cool as leads, especially if you like auto filter them like bandpass or low pass, whatever. Just take out some of the higher harmonics because it's going to be really, really complex. And that can be really cool effects. Also, another thing about that is uniformity. And I'm not talking about that really today, but uniformity means, in my mind, it means that you have a very consistent sound throughout your entire song. Like, so if say like you do go into like a lo-fi part, at the end of your beat or whatever, the uniformity there is going to be the timbre of the drums, also the quality of the sound that comes in. It's going to be very similar to the quality before, even if it was more of a trap, whatever. So you can kind of like have a balance between two different vibes, but then also apply new sounds that somewhat sound like they fit already because they're originating from another sound you're using for like your main attraction or whatever, And that can be a really easy way to create kind of like a motif. That's another name for it. Where that can literally be, like a bass line that you choose. So if you choose a bass line that has like a very specific progression, say like a bar long or maybe even 2 bars, or even has like a chord modulation halfway through it. You can have that whole thing laid out on your bass, pitch it up 4 or 5 octaves, throw a reverb on it, and then put that in your intro. And now you have, kind of a motif of the bass line you're about to drop, just kind of like as a hint of where it's about to go. So then once you go and bring the pitch down version, you can even, modulate the patch that you're using to synthesize that sound in general, and kind of get a better, blending between those two sounds when you start to build up. So you can layer it in, stack them in different ways, and they will kind of work together just because they're from the same original sound. So that's something to keep in mind when doing that, because it's a very easy way to go both make more sounds for your track and then have those sounds work in the track. So you're not sound designing random shit and then convoluting your workflow. So that's really what this all kind of is focusing on, is how to maximize your workflow. Because if you're gonna if you're gonna have a good workflow, it has to be very consistent with how you go and find new sounds. You like leads from this synth, you like basses from this synth, you like to do this and that synth. So when you're going for certain things, you personally have a preference in what you're going for. Serum and most other wavetable synths, Faceplant is kind of a wavetable synth. It has a wavetable oscillator. It's not its main attraction though. Are so flexible, you can make any of these sounds in them. You can make drums, you can make literally anything. But, jack of all trades, master of none. Master of the growl bass, really, for Serum. For Faceplant, definitely is a little bit more flexible because of its fully modular design. I guess semi-modular because it is contained within itself, but it has a lot more flexibility in how you put it together. So you can actually change your signal flow and all this other shit that Serum cannot do, because that's just not how it's made. But, it doesn't mean that you can't make literally every single one of the sounds inside of this class from this one synth. But yeah, so anyways. So now the final point here, it's kind of like what I was just talking about, timbre, how the sound evolves over time, how it sounds, literally. So you can start from one of these basic sounds in whatever, and then kind of change the timbre, have it evolve into something that's a little bit more complex halfway through the drop. Say with techno, it can be really evolving over the course of 32 bars. You can even have a bunch of other stuff that's constantly changing as well, but still keeping one rhythmic phrase, just so it's really, really digestible. Yeah, and so there's a lot of things exactly to what I was just saying. They can be interchangeable. They're all part of one main thing, which is the sound. So this is going to be each quality of your sound for every sound. You'll be able to apply all three of these things to it. So if it's an envelope thing, what are you doing? Stab, chord stab, bass stab, donk. It's we have all the stabs you want. Pitch, what are we using it for? Are we using it for punch, or are we using it to create a drum? Are we using it to pitch down an 808 so it does an impact sound? Or are we putting a wobble on it so it has kind of vibrato effect? Especially with leads, that's huge. Vibrato on the mod wheel, so you can kind of pinch squeal it out like you're playing a guitar. So yeah, there's so many different things that you can apply just from these three things. So if you just think about it like that, kind of start setting up your workflow to kind of just organize shit and then just execute. It'll be a lot quicker. Anyways, so kind of everything I was just talking about and just said is all right here as well. So one big point I will make just right now is that if you're going to take this class and really want to learn shit from it, you're going to definitely lose, you're going to lose ground by using other presets because it's going to just set you back. The more you go and copy what people have already done, the more you're going to learn exactly that one thing only. So that's kind of the point of why I'm teaching just the general knowledge as opposed to make this specific sound by this artist. So there'll never be like you know, assignment, I guess, that will be based around, hey, go find your favorite artist and go make their main bass. Because that's not going to be how you become unique. That's going to be how you learn how to make that sound and how to sound like them. So, you know, I say that from, about 5-6 years of teaching and seeing people grow over the course of the EDM boom and what they're still stuck doing now. So, it's like gone at it many ways. I've enabled certain things like putting other people's tracks in your session, all that other stuff. Not necessarily a bad thing. What I see it as a bad thing for is that it stunts people's growth. That's really just it. And when it stunts growth, it also proliferates something that is a big problem in the scene, which is people, I guess, not stealing, but being too directly influenced. So they may not be stealing everything from their track. There are definitely people out there who do steal tracks and who do steal main kicks, snares, basses, whatever you want. They'll steal everything. Some people don't have that kind of filter. They don't have integrity. So that's really what it's all about. It's just like having integrity and then executing based on your own integrity. The only thing that, is your validation is whether or not you like it. That should be kind of, at the end of the day, what you settle on when you go and design a specific sound. Because if you really like a sound that you stumble on one day, that can be your unique sound. If you have 2 tracks that get signed to a big label and those go the fuck off, then you will be known for that sound. Those 2 tracks will define your sound. I'm sure a bunch of people would agree. Say like with DMVU and Blocked, or Peekaboo and Babatunde. Those are 2 perfect examples. So, depending on what you want to do, say with those 2 specific people, they can go back and do that and not feel weird about it. But then if they have 50 other people who just made that 1 to 2 tracks they released that set their vibe, and now there's 1,000 Babatundes out there, then it becomes a little bit less fun, for that person and for everybody else. It becomes boring. We've heard that song before. We want to hear something new. So that's really the big point. Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing about that is just, allowing yourself to have space to go and find that shit. Sitting down and just digging for hours. Because that's where, again, a lot of that shit actually comes together. Maybe Babatunde was way over complexified and then he just switched the bass at the last second and was like, that's it. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. Again, with a grain of salt, it's my opinion. I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is good, this is bad. You have the choice. I'm telling you, this is how it's going to be the most effective. Not just from me, but from anybody and anything you learn, from here on forward, if you're listening to this. But yeah. So anyways, beyond that, and we're only going to talk for like a couple more minutes here, because I want to like just jump into designing stuff for the rest of this class. So the history lesson I wanted to talk about was the drum and bass. Because drums and bass are where all this comes together. Because without breaks, without rhythm, without something to syncopate with, which is subdividing a beat. You have, a hi-hat on the upbeat or on 2 and 4, and then you have a bass that goes and plays 8th notes in between that. And then you can have another hi-hat that goes and follows that bass line. So everything about what you choose on your implementation side will be amplified if you understand how to lock that in with your groove. Yeah, exactly. So, the LA beat scene definitely has that down because it's about the groove with hip hop. So hip hop, lives, in just LA, New York, everywhere in the US really. Um, but, you know, that's really where a lot of this stuff kind of like finds its vibe. And a lot of the people that were sampling in the early days, say like even Madlib or Dilla, they're big into jazz. So they sample jazz, and that's how they get all these different, um, you know, different like swing ideas and also different chord progressions that they're able to go and repeat and then just really capture like one very resolved chord. And when you repeat like a resolved chord a bunch of times, just like a break, where it's like, I even have the example that I'm talking about right now, which is like Grandmaster Flash, you know, looping the break and people just going off because of that. So that's really what that's about. Finding that one vibe that you really, 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 really like, that you can listen to over and over within 2 bars. You should be able to listen to that 2 bars over and over and just literally vibe out. Um, so at the core of bass sound design, that's where it is. When you have a bass that kind of like is showcased on, you know, how it syncopates with the rhythm, which is like drum and bass. So like jump up, kind of like plays in between the kick and snare. With dubstep or rhythm, it's kind of like vibing along that possible, I guess, dance hall, four on the floor kick style with like a wonk kind of vibe where it's like whack, 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 a whack, a whack. But then it goes into dance hall and then it just, smacks. But all those things have kind of a rooting in that kind of drum and bass vibe. It's like dub reggae, that's probably one of my favorite, styles of dubstep, I guess, is the more dub reggae stuff, like the deep dubstep, where that really just is about like how vibey the beat is and then how deep the sub goes. So it can literally be a basic little FM wub where it's like wop, 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 and then it has like a really really swung beat in the background. A lot of that stuff is also very grime as well. So grime, dub reggae, dancehall, all that stuff kind of gets the same influence. So all those vibes just along the beat side of making the beat influences the bass. So as a bass player, like that's kind of like I look for when I'm listening to music because I listen to the bass line. So if you're kind of like locking into those like original styles that each one of these styles is kind of pulling from, I even talk about a bunch about house as well because I was really into house for a minute. Um, Not like big room and stuff. I've produced a bunch, but it's not really something that I am personally into. Um, Although I can see why people are into it because it's very happy-go-lucky. It's every track is like you won the game. That's really what big room house is, or big room trance, because it's really progressive trance, like at the core of it. There's big room house. The big room house stuff is the more like bouncy, kind of weird house stuff. So there's a lot of different versions of that. Probably the coolest version of that was Jungle Terror. That's the only style that I actually miss. Jungle Terror was really cool. I really respected WeWek for that whole style. And a bunch of people hopped on it for a summer, and then it just died. But all that shit kind of like gets its influence from these originators, which is like techno, acid, electro. And that stuff, like electro house, that comes from a bunch of different influences. The original electro style was funk on top of house, so that's Giorgio Moroder, Daft Punk, all those other people. So the original electro is what people really know as house music. Like if you knew nothing about electronica, which is what other people call it, or EDM, Daft Punk, that kind of stuff, that's more of the electro house stuff. or French house, which is a little bit more vibey again, but it's all just kind of like centered around this kick snare, either at 110, 120. It could be all over the place. So electro house can also be 100 BPM, and be technically techno, kind of like a sophistine. So that's exactly where, like the res vibe comes from, because that's all around that. Because was also influenced by very specific artists in Berlin and a bunch of other European artists that were doing a very specific vibe that he was capturing. David Guetta invented house music. But yeah, so there's like a ton of different perspectives on this. So whether or not you're doing dubstep, drum and bass, techno, house, electro house, hip hop, bass music, like it's all going to be kind of like centered around one main thing. How does the drum and the bass talk to each other? And specifically with hip hop, like that's 1000% the vibe. Like, so with like trap stuff, you can really syncopate the beat, which is like create a ton of space, and then have just a straight up 808 sample, and then have some weird old, bloopy samples on top, make it drippy, or put some metal screeches on top, make it wonky, depending on how you want to go and set the bass line up. So then the bass line's based around only the sub, and then that weird sample you're putting on top that's syncopating and people go dumb to is kind of syncopating with that subline. So you're essentially layering it. That's more of a sample technique though. But you can also make really screechy sounds with synth. But yeah, so, everything has its kind of originator. And I left this little thing at the end here. Check out the music map. It's pretty interesting. Hit the navigator. You can see all these different styles when they originated, who's kind of like the big person responsible for that origination. So I didn't really give any specific names here besides, say, like the Skrillex, example, because Skrillex is a very, very big anomaly in EDM. He's like the thing that made it mainstream. And that's because he went in and did his thing. It wasn't too calculated. This guy's flying by the seat of his pants most of the day. But it's talking shit. But he definitely is very true to what he likes. So, Electro House, all the other shit that kind of influenced where he's been, also trance, he decided to bring that into dubstep, and it killed it. Killed it so hard that people drained his sound for at least 5 to 6 years straight, which is kind of unheard of in nowadays. Yeah, you didn't miss that much. So, but yeah, we're almost done talking about this outline here. But yeah, the big point of that is that if you go and take different things that you like and serve them on one plate, you're going to find that other people also like all those things. So you got to take what you've learned, who you are as a person, and apply that to your music. And that's how you'll be way more, very much way more unique. Because like if you understand where, it's been, you understand where to go next. And what's great about hip hop is that it's so malleable, it hasn't died. And it continues to get steam. It's pretty cool. Because hip hop has turned into almost all of these different genres. Think about dub, reggae, that stuff comes in like alongside it. So really the same era though. So that was a huge era for pretty much all of music. A ton of strife that kind of like made all that happen. But here we are, how many years later? 40 plus? And it's still like proliferating, maybe 30 plus. maybe about 40. So, it's kind of like rock music and all that stuff. That's never going to die. It's just going to keep changing. You cannot break stuff like this. You can try to invent something that you think will work, and then you can drain that as much as possible. And what you're going to find when you do that is you actually are able to kill genres doing that. Just like if you do anything non-renewable, it will kill something. You are taking from something. So hip-hop is just constantly finding new ways to express itself because it's so organic. Big Room House died because everybody was trying to make Animals by Martin Garrix. So lifespan-wise, not the same comparison whatsoever. So if you're trying to think about, hey, dude, how am I going to make lasting music? I can look at the music that lasts. Remember real music? Anyways, so that's all I'm going to talk about today. There's a bunch of stuff that you can think about. Again, it's all around carving your niche. Manifesting your destiny. So you gotta just do what you love. Eventually it'll give back to you. Alright, so again, read this through, just kind of understand it, and then also go to some other source and find more history on whatever you love. If I was your mentor, personally training you, I would assign you a specific thing that we've talked about. So I never, whenever I train somebody, I'm like, hey, go make Gesaffelstein's track. No, it's not that. It's like, we're going to talk about techno, we're going to talk about all this other stuff, we're going to listen to a bunch of other things that you're into. That's the kind of thing. So it's not about copying one person. Assimilation isn't about that either. It's about understanding why somebody does something and then doing that. Okay, so now moving on to the second part here. We're going to be designing some sounds. Alright, so I'm going to play this track through and we can just kind of peep it. Super rough. Hence why I brought it up here, but I kind of like it. I'm also doing vocals on it. Alrighty. Alright. Anyways, so this is a little whip. Literally just a drum kit into a big old bass. And I'm using Nave from Waldorf, which is another wavetable synth. One of my favorites, to be honest. A little bit older than Serum. It's actually pretty much Serum before Serum. Anyways, so it's It's time. It's time for sound design. Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff we need to talk about today. So I have the new serum update here. A lot of really cool stuff now. I'm really stoked on it. So first point in here is regular sub bass. So there's a bunch of ways to go about this. You know, again, with pretty much all of these different sounds here, there's a uniform envelope depending on the type of sound that you're going for. So if you're going for like, you know, again, a donk bass, you can go and apply that to the respace part or melodic supersaw or web, you know. And I even make that point here that you can make it into a web by backing off the attack. So you make that attack medium. And medium is around about 20 milliseconds to, you know, whatever you need to make it kind of like complete within one cycle, one trigger of the note. You want it to wub. So with wubs, you can play them back with MIDI. Donks, you can play them back with MIDI. With the wobble bass, you hold down one note and then it makes your progression. With everything else here, it's going to be very much about, you know, combining some of those elements together in order to make it move along rhythmically with your beat. So let's start at the top here, talking about standard sub bass. We got a bunch of different ways to go about this. Of course, we can just use a basic sine wave and get exactly what we're looking for. Again, we want to design around the lower register here. So in this track that I'm working with here, I have a sub that I'm making from Operator, just one of my presets that I go to a lot. And this just has a couple overtones. I'm running it into a saturator to thicken it out. So whenever you're working with sub, you want a couple things to be perfect. And this is something that you should do from now on whenever you're making a sub, is you want your phase to be always at 0. It can be in the center here, but that means the start of your waveform is reverse phase, meaning that it's in rarefaction stage, and your kick could possibly be in compression stage when they both hit at the same time. Or you can have other things that are on the low end that aren't lining up because of that problem. So you want to make sure that it's at 0 phase and randomized phase is all the way off. So if you're in any other system, there'll be a button for it, there'll be a way to specify exactly where the phase should start every single time. Phase plant will kind of have the same thing. In phase plant, I have phase plant open here. We can use a sine wave here, and then if we hear any discrepancy, we can push it to 1 or we can push it to -1. So I'll make sure that it always starts right at that 0 crossing. But by default, this should be pretty phase accurate. It should always be restarting. But you can modulate it plus or minus 1. You can also shift it plus or minus 1. So 1000%, that's something you should know about making a sub, is you need the phase to line up. Without that, it's going to phase out different parts of your low end in your track. Okay, so now, like say if you're building a sub patch from scratch. Okay, so let's just bring this all the way back here. All right, so if we're working with, you know, like something that needs to be intelligible on multiple systems, we're not going to really be able to hear like a perfect sine wave. So if we keep it as a perfect sine wave, when it's on like, not even like a phone, that's really not something we're worried about, unless you're doing like a hip hop track where it's like Dirty South or anything else like trap, you might want to go and distort the sub. So you add some odd harmonics in there that come through on a system with no sub, because that can literally be part of the track that needs to, you know, add a little bit more intensity to it. Also, once you do go and add that stuff that makes it intelligible on different systems, which is more harmonics, not just the fundamental, it will sound way thicker on a big system. All right, so in this setting, we have a perfect sine wave. So in this, we want to make sure it's mono. We want to make sure that it is mono either in here, which is the voice section, in phase plant. You're gonna want to set your polyphony to 1 here, and also have retrigger mode on. So legato mode will not trigger your envelopes. Both synths have legato mode, that's the standard. Okay, so you want to make sure that's on, mono mode. Then you can add more voices to the center, like this. We already know this, because we already did the serum part. So we talked about summing as well. So when you add more voices to one oscillator, and all the phases are stacking, they're not being randomized, then it's going to get louder. All right, so that's another thing that will add to your, kind of the weight of the sound. So we have a ton of noise floor here, which is around neg 168, which is really, really quiet for all this aliasing that we see here. So we can get some of that back by saturating, or if we wanted to go and add like another waveform here, like up a couple octaves or something like that, it's also a really, really good option. All right, so this is something that I do for a lot of different subs, as opposed to going and saturating as well. Is I'll just go and put a straight up sine wave at, a ratio of 2 or 4. So that means an octave up or 2 octaves up. So we wanted to have that low pass filter kind of relationship. So we want to make sure it's, either, 6 to 12 dB in relationship here. We have only percentage to go off of, so we have to kind of like work with a spectrum if we're trying to be super accurate. Although, if you know what to listen for, you can definitely hear when it's perfect. So for me, when I know it's perfect is when I can feel the sub, but then I also hear this other tone that kind of just sounds like a sawtooth, or could sound like a mild square wave. So when you go up to a ratio of 2, you're creating a kind of like a basic filtered down sawtooth sub. Because in a sawtooth, you have all the uneven harmonics. So in a square wave, you don't have an octave up. You have a ratio of 3, which is an octave and a fifth. So you could also try this. Thicken it out with adding the second harmonic, or third harmonic, I mean, octave and a fifth, and then bring it in a couple dB below this other sine wave here. Also, if you want to just kind of like create a good relationship in general, turn on key tracking, because you want your low pass to follow the note that you're playing. Then you can set it around your center here and set up the low pass relationship. So again, what you're looking for quality wise, you're not going to feel the sub. Anyway, for hearing this on a headset, so I am actually on headphones right now and I can hear the sub. One thing that's really good about certain headphones, like the M50Xs, is you do get this kind of psychoacoustic effect. You can kind of hear the low end. So that's a good question. So no, I don't always start with sine waves for my subs, but I do use it most of the time. It depends on what I'm doing. So this is my preset I go to a lot. And so you can see here, I have actually 2 harmonics, second and third, and then I'm adding some modulation to that third in order to give a little bit more I guess, representation of complex harmonics around the third harmonic. So it kind of fills in that gap a little bit more. But yeah, so it's a good question because that's actually the next point here. So we can actually make subs like this without any of this stuff. Just use straight up sawtooth waves or square waves. So this is kind of like a Moog sub. So Moog subs are a little bit closer to a sawtooth wave filtered down. So usually the perfect pitch, and we can go, oops, don't want to do that. We can go to the global tab and turn on double click for typable values. All right, so we have, it's set at 440. That's going to give you kind of like the right pitch, the center pitch for where you're playing, and I'm playing at C0 right now. So you can drive that a little bit more, and then add a little bit more harmonic content to that. At range, do you usually cut the sub from your mid basses? Do you parallel process at all for the low end, or layer a clean sub underneath a low cut mid bass channel? That's a good question. All right, so I'm actually doing that here because this sound, this nave here, is a mid bass. So what I do is I cut around, 20 to 80 hertz. So it's not actually that much of a crossover. It's actually pretty steep. And this is also specific for this sound because I just wanted to fit in pure sub underneath this kind of like mid bass, but also has low mids. Depending on what type of sound I'm going for, I'll modulate the crossover because I want like a thicker low end. I'll have more of the low end covered by the sub, meaning up to about 150 to about 300. So I don't really go too much farther beyond that because then that becomes a very drastic high pass. So if I do though, then this becomes a high bass layer. It's not a mid bass anymore. I have another whole section here that I can fill in with something. Put noise there, I can put a sample there, whatever. Yeah, so you want to keep a lot of the low mid character to exactly what Phydra's saying there, because that actually blends between the two sections here. So if you actually just listen to what I got going on here, check that out. All right, so then without the sub, all right, so the sub shouldn't be overwhelming. It shouldn't mess up anything with your relationship to your kick as well. And it also should be somewhat uniform to your bass. If this was a little bit more high passed and it was like a little rhythm on top, then I might change up the rhythm between my actual two sections here. But if you're really trying to just maximize the character of your main bass, best thing to do is not even worry about sub. If sub is part of the sound and you need sub in order to get the character of the distortion that you're doing or whatever, then leave the sub, don't mess with it, don't touch it, and then take it off later. Because that's another thing that will give you your sound, is when to go and destroy things in a way that you shouldn't. Because like if you do that, then you'll be doing something that somebody hasn't thought of, because things you shouldn't do are usually the thing that you should do and should at least try once. In some aspects, not all aspects. Do not take my words and go do some dumb shit. Alright, so I kept that low mid because I wanted to have a little bit more character when I go and reverb throw it. So just on the downbeats here, I can reverb throw. Just throw it in a distance also add a little bit of tremolo. And then I have it running through this vocoder, and I'm also kind of shifting around the character of the vocoder. Just a little bit. Really, I'm just cleaning up all of the other shit that's going on in this sound with the vocoder. So that kind of like cleans up that mid bass. So I can fit my sub in here. Because before it had sub, but it was a little bit too muddy because of all the movement I had on it. So I just wanted to layer it with a nice kind of like 808 style sub. So, you know, it shouldn't sound like it takes up. It should sound like it just fills in this range that, you know, just kind of locks it all together. All right, so to Iconic's question, what type of saturation do I recommend? I recommend either medium curve or hard curve. So clip distortion is super good for subs, especially sine waves, because now you're adding in those odd harmonics into the sound. So if you go and do that, then you will be able to like hear more of the harmonics on different systems. So you want to go and like add anything that's kind of like a hard curve clipped wave shape. But it to that exact point here. So say if I was making like a really, really hard bass here, and then now we're in the phase plant, we have an overdrive. I can go and change this to any type of saturation curve that's in here. Hard clip. Let's get a spectrum up as well. Okay, so I have a ton of harmonics in this. So it generates the harmonics, and then I go and shave them off. So I want to focus around lower harmonics in order to get a little bit more representation of this here. So we can add, you know, multiple layers to this. And I do this a lot with trash. So I'll go and hard clip the lows and then use the filter built in trash in order to just go and low pass all the really buzzy harmonics out of there. I want to get that normalized, hard clipped, really loud sine wave. So, you know, like that sounds pretty thick. And then I can go and thicken that out even more by boosting the fundamental. We can EQ it up. We can do a lot of different things for this, actually. Multi-band dynamics is a good one. And we're going to talk more about this when we go into processing and stuff. But if I'm looking for the fundamental, which should be in the range of 100 to anywhere below, then I can go and kind of showcase that, stop around 80. Then I can go and expand those lows. So if the expander is a little bit too hot, it will create more distortion. So that can also be another way to get distortion. And then filter. Why does the OTT do this? Because it is actually clipping, firing off so quickly that it's creating clicks and pops that generate these harmonics. Another thing you can do is start to scoop. So scoop out harmonics that you don't want. So if around here it's a little bit too much mud, you can go and scoop out your low mids. All right, so really what you want is you want it to be loud, but you also want it to be consistent. You don't want it to lose power. So if it loses power, then it doesn't fill out the mix as much. But again, you can go and modulate like release, depending on how you want to do it. And then also add punch to the pitch with an envelope of any type. Let's go and add an envelope here, envelope, go and patch that into, let's go pitch shift here. And we'll make it really quick. So quick envelope, we want it to be sharp as well, exponential. And then make it short, about 10 to 20 milliseconds, just like the transient of a kick. Then we can also add that onto the cutoff here. Give it a little bit more size, a little bit more weight. All right, so that can be really cool, especially when designing like a basic sub bass, because it's gonna really punch with the beat. This sub that I just made right now on Face Plant, this would stand up by itself in a Dirty South mix. What does the flipped gate sidechain do? If you already talked about that. Yes, so I did talk about that, so I can bring that back up in a little bit. Thank you for that. But yeah, so you know, you can thicken it out, scoop out things that you don't want anymore, and then just showcase the things that need to be there. You know, like some of the upper harmonics. Sometimes I'll go and like do something like this in a parallel. If I just want to get a little bit of noise in the sound and erosion on top of the sub is a little bit too much. So erosion on this will definitely fill out the frequency range here. And then we can go and like high pass after the erosion, because we don't want to have all that low end in there. It's going to sum up and get super loud. And then we can just use this volume to control how much noise that we want. Actually just solo these drums. Oh, okay. Yeah, to Finland's question, flipgate to separate your sub from your mid bass. Yeah, so I don't do anything like that. The only time I go and do any type of flipgate stuff is for sidechaining. So I like the sidechain on flipgate because it's really, really clean and quick, and I just like that quick little slice. I don't want an actual volume bump. I just want it to cut all the way out down to 0. So when I go and put them on the layers, it's really just to get the uniformity between all the side chains. So everything just hits at the same time. I also sometimes just run everything that needs to be sidechained through one sidechain submaster. But that's not really part of my workflow because it's kind of limiting. You also have to do a lot of routing for it. But yeah, that's kind of like the workflow with that. All right, so moving on to a couple of different other styles of basses here. So that should be really applicable to a lot of different stuff. And we just talked about this pretty in depth, which is adding more harmonics to your sine wave in order to fill out the rest of the spectrum here. And with this, again, it's for thickness, to add weight to your sound. It's also to get a better representation, translatability on different systems. So you can do this, and I've done this to other people's tracks that I've mixed. So I've parallel process their subs in order to bring out a little bit more weight for translatability. Again, to make their masters sound louder and to just make their entire track hit louder. Especially if somebody hands me a hip hop mix to do. That's something that they definitely want. They want you to make it loud. They don't know how it's going to happen, but they just want it loud. IA sound, how do you decide if you want parallel noise in series, or is it parallel purely because of the sub is focused in the lows, so you don't want to risk the mids coming through? All right, so in that situation, I wanted the erosion to be in a parallel because, yes, I have a lot of mid bass or mid-range frequencies in this sub. So I just want to add it as a flavor because I will add straight up erosion on a perfect sine wave pretty much. No, to Iconic's question, am I team sidechain or envelope adjustment? To your question, no. I don't subscribe to any teams. But also, I do it per case basis. So if I need more sidechaining for one hit, I'll do the volume automation sidechain, and then I will have one really clean sidechain that I want to snap to either the kick or the snare. And really that's it. You know, I don't have any other sidechains that do anything else besides locking to a sub. So if I wanted to lock a sub into like a mid bass, then I'd do another sidechain with a gate. And that would just be in regular mode. Okay, so now moving on, we're talking about sawtooths, and we're going to be talking about a couple other basses here. So we're going to be kind of talking more about this when we go into 808s and some other stuff and sampling some of these sounds. But, you know, as a exercise, you know, just for yourself, make some subs that are dank. Add some, you know, modulation to the coarse pitch tuning, regular pitch tuning, anything like that. Option shift click makes it unipolar, remember that. Then you want quick envelope. So you set it to envelope mode, make it quick. You can take it off sync, make it quick like this. Let's get back to a sine wave here. All right, so when you're working with basic sine waves, you can like hear that rumble and all that stuff. So that is really cool for like certain styles of sounds. Also, one last note about this. I choose more filled in, more resonated, more harmonic sub basses when I have less harmonics in my mid bass. So if my mid bass doesn't have that crossover set at like 150, it's actually not even a bass at all. It's just a weird sampled sound that I've stretched out and looped. Then I will go and fill that gap with my sub. Because I want something to take that space whenever I do put something there. I want to just fill out the entire range, and I want to like pretty much wash anybody that's like right up next to the sub. It's like, too much. Because like when you're working on phrasing and you actually understand like how phrasing works, you'll be able to notice it like in everybody's music that is very successful, I guess, in terms of making a vibe happen. You know, the most successful DJs are the ones that can produce stuff like that know how to control a crowd with their music. And so they're designing the tracks to control the crowd in different ways. They like other tracks controlling the crowd. So they kind of take that phrasing, learn how to control a crowd from the way people take stuff out, throw in little ear candy, reverse shit, you know, all this stuff that makes impacts louder, you know, even filling in the gaps with just noise, straight up noise that makes things feel closer to you, because it's about perceived loudness. Perceived loudness is about, you know, is it farther or closer away? So when we hear the lack of mid-range, it gives us a lack of depth. Low end really kind of fucks us up. So, because it takes so long to develop and we don't hear it normally in everyday life. You know, so it's kind of a somewhat unnecessary range of frequencies that our ears aren't geared to hear exactly. So we kind of have to just fill it in, make it kind of sneak into the frequency range. All right, so that's gonna be kind of where I leave off there on subs. So definitely more questions will be appreciated. Yeah. So yeah, and to Iconic's question or point about David Foster doing that for a de-esser, that's something that a lot of people do for ADR and VO. ADR is additional dialogue recording, and this that's pretty much like how you have to go and replace S sounds and different things, and then just turn down a frequency for a second because you want. It's like he moved closer to the mic just for 1 second, so you go and automate it down for that one hit. And I definitely do that a lot with, you know, up close to far away chorused sounds or chorused sections with just, you know, not just chorusing like the effect, the actual section of the track that is the chorus. I will spread out the vocals and then pretty much take off all the de-essing so it's brighter, but then pull everything back by about 6 dB. So then it sums and just sounds wide, and then I'll put a center voice. And so it just feels like a whole choir. Hence why it's the chorus. It needs to feel like it's, you know, it's everybody in the homies singing along. All right. Okay, so now on to Sawtooth stuff. So again, all this stuff is applicable to any waveform now. So that's why I talked about sub as it pertains to sine waves and other waveforms, because other waveforms have other frequencies. So I'm giving you basic guidelines. You go and break those guidelines, do whatever the fuck you want. That's the point. All right, so now we're talking about duo saws. So a duo saw is very, very classic sound. Very easy to make on any hardware synth, mainly because most, if not all, at least have 2 oscillators. So 2 sawtooth waves. And then we want to detune those 2 sawtooth waves very slightly. Okay, so this is the beginning of the Reese, you know, but this sound can be used for many things. And I've dropped a filter on here because here's one direct sound. Say like if you make any garage kind of stuff, or say like Witch House, really, really slow, emotional trap. Then this is a really, really good sound for this. So you just want a little movement. You can add more voices to this one oscillator, but still we are working with a duo saw because we have 2 oscillators controlling our sound. Then we can put that in a space. Make it a little bit closer. It's instantly cinematic. Damn you, Magic Mouse. So yeah, that's a really, really easy sound with this. And again, I'm not doing anything to this envelope. Quick attack, 100% sustain, decay can be any length. I say short because you don't even want to worry about it. In a sound like this, I might push the release because this is, again, for a specific application. If I want it to sound kind of like this, or have like a little tap to it, can make it a little stab. Okay, so what I'm doing here and really manipulating, we talked about this in audio engineering class, is beating effects. So by slightly detuning two waveforms that aren't starting on the exact same phase, because we don't want these to be phase locked, because this is what happens when it's phase locked. We'll take off all the extra voices. So first we'll have it at 0. It gets super loud. So when we start to detune this, it's going to immediately comb filter. So we can kind of hear on the top. That can be a desired effect. But we are definitely getting comb filtering. The more detune that's on there, the more we're going to hear that comb filtering. So you can do a tri-saw here, have these two be like really wide detuned voices, and then add in the sub oscillator as a center voice, run all three of those through a filter. Okay, so now a couple questions here. Let's say you have an atonal mid-range sample. How do you go about tuning the sub to the sample? By taking out the low end of the sample and playing whatever note you want under it, dude. Welcome to mid-range rhythm, mid-bass, bro. Alright, so that's literally how you can make any fucking rhythm track. Make it sound like it's in any key. Literally make the wonkiest shit that has no pitch, literally. It's some dissonant, comb-filtered sound. Take out the low end, put a wonky sub under it, now it's in a key. Seen it, done it, and it's just a very, very easy way to go make rhythm. So when you detune, is there a difference between keeping one at 0 and only detuning the other one versus tuning one and the other plus minus? So what I was saying is I would have one like this and then one like this. So what that kind of changes is now you don't have any center voice that is the right pitch. So you can have that be the thing, but just keep in mind that it's going to be a little bit detuned and it might offset with some of your other sounds. So that is actually kind of cool with like lo-fi if you want things to sound a little bit weird. What I also do sometimes is I'll go and put a basic LFO on my fine tune and have it just move very slightly so it's like there's drift. So I'll turn off the BPN, make it slow, make it off mode. Yeah, so that'll be a really easy way to kind of like make some kind of drifting, somewhat hardware sounding kind of like chords and bass lines and stuff. Alright, so when we're making just a specific bass line for this, I want to make like a really detuned duo saw, you know, kind of the same practice here. Let's modulate some of the phase. So I like these to be at least one at a odd number so I have a center channel again. Oops. I'm sorry about that. Hold up. Let me turn all these tracks off besides the beat right now. Alright, so that's one really easy bass to do with this. Again, it's kind of like a filtered down basic respace, but this can be used for like trap, hip hop, and those are two different things. Drum and bass, you know, like a liquid roller. So that's that bass. It can be put into a very moody, ambient tune. It can be put into a lot of different stuff. This sound specifically is very emotive. It gives you a lot of emotion. Just because it sounds deep, it sounds like a string, could be a trumpet, could be a tuba, you know, all these different instruments this could be. Exactly, every single wave song. And this is a duo saw. Not constrained to using unison voices though. So it can be technically more than duo saw. It's a duo saw times 16. And that's serum. You know, that's saying I want to make this sound. What do I got now in this new synth? Cool. Let's use that. Dope. All right, so you can do a lot of different stuff with that. Also, you know, this is not just for this. So I have another version of this. Well, kind of center on the saw base a little bit. But we can use this as an FM routing as well. And we can use it as a harmonic bass. Let's get a little basic processing going on here. Alright, so I chose this number because of the harmonic series, because I like the way it sounds, because I like fits. Power chords are dope. So that's one of the reasons why I chose the pitch. But if you choose pitches that are specifically in the harmonic series, it will sound very complete. You could even layer this at like 50% volume and kind of fill in its frequency range just with this one sound here, and then use it as an FM modulator. Alright, so only using two voices here because I'm only using two oscillators and each has one unison voice. But I'm using FM now, and I'm keeping it constrained to the harmonic series values only. And then I can mix in either the amplitude of the oscillator, or I can add in the repitching that happens from two sawtooths modulating each other. So this is a ton of different like jump up sounds. This is a ton of different halftime sounds. Also a very modular sound too. You know, because sawtooths modulating each other like this sound very good as drones as well. So again, try detuning it. So in this scenario, because I want to make it sound pretty clean with the FM, one voice, everything centered around the same phase as well. So if I go to a ratio of 9, which is 3 plus 2, I'll get this kind of sound. So only need 2 sawtooths to make this sound. It's kind of like that Slum Village remix Moody Good made. Alright, so that's a really good one. And this is just a really consistent, easy bass to make. Very executable. You know, and then you can go and apply this to whatever waveform you want. It's not just duo saw. It's duo whatever. You know, that's where you should start unlimiting yourself with this. Alright, so again, layering with the sub here as well, you know, where I can actually pitch this entire sound up with the FM, and then just go and add in low end with the sub on my sub oscillator. So that's duo saws. Duo saws in the duo FM scenario and duo detune scenario. So both of those sounds are applicable to like 10 different genres. This is the kind of stuff that you go into a preset pack and dig for. You're like, oh, that one sounds dope, moody, works. And it'd probably be some basic patch kind of like that. Yeah, I feel you. Remap is super sick. Okay, so that is where I'm going to stop with that. So now we have just kind of like basic sawtooths. Before we get into the respace and then melodic super saw. Kind of already talked about the melodic super saw, which is kind of like the duo, but with more oscillators. The real super saws is achievable in phase playing. Serum is a fake super saw because it's duplicating, detuning, putting it somewhere in the frequency range, all that stuff. So technically a super saw is duplicating one voice inside of an oscillator, but in a larger environment, say like a modular environment, a super saw would not just be 2 oscillators. It would be the combination of about 5 to 10. Each voice would just be one specific oscillator coming in to fill in that range, which means you can mix in all these different types of saws together in order to do that. It's a multi-saw. It's not limited to 1 or 2. 1-2 duo saw is a thing because most hardware synths pre a certain era didn't have the capability to affordably make more than 2 oscillators inside of a really good synth. Alright, so moving on to that, we have the basic sawtooth bass. And this kind of like similar to what I was talking about with sub theory as well, where these sounds really just kind of like have their strength because of the application. So I'm putting a sawtooth sound into like a hip hop, you know, beat or halftime beat, whatever. So track done, don't need to do anything to that. But I'm also doing stuff to it. So when this is going to be the only thing in your mix, there is a bunch of stuff to keep in mind. Because this is kind of a vibe. It's not that it's like in now because EEPROM does this. It's a vibe. A lot of people do it. Not just EEPROM. A lot of people did it before. A lot of people, this is the only way to make this type of sound. If you listen to a lot of Dilla, when he does use synths it's really just a basic sawtooth. And a lot of the early Flylo, a lot of the early, or I guess later Madlib, because most of Madlib stuff is very sample based, but Dilla definitely use some synths every now and then. And it's kind of the vibe with it. Just a basic, really well processed sawtooth wave. All right, so really what you want to do when you start making sounds like this is how are you going to make it interesting? Because it's the most basic sound in the world. It's the basic sawtooth, so there's really, really only a few things you can do, which is post-processing. Like if you're really going for this sound, once you start to go and add, anything else to this waveform, like say like blend effects or anything else like this, it's going to change up the sound drastically. I'm compressing the shit out of those minutes. All right, so it's not going to be exactly what you want. Personally, it wouldn't be exactly what I want. So what I want to do is I want to add like a perfect sub in there. So again, we want everything to line up with our phase. So we got to make sure compression phase is where the compression phase is on here, as well as other places. So now I can cut out the lows with this basic sawtooth and nothing changes with the amplitude of the lows. All right, so only high passing here. Sounds pretty cool. It'd be dope with a bunch of other basses around it. So that's the kind of thing that really just like pushes this type of sound. It's like you're trying to lock onto like more of a melodic vibe, so you're doing less with the sound design. So that's a choosing moment where you got to choose whether or not you want to be very, drastic with your production, I guess sound design in this case, and then be able to showcase something basic in a really dope light. So that's something that, people that are able to pull this basic sound off now, it's something to do really well. So you got to be able to go and apply that to it in order to make it kind of stand out in the mix. Like add a ton of momentary reverb throws. I do that mostly with Valhalla stuff, but just for the sake of right now. Actually give it a little pitch bend. So you hear that movement is actually from this very, very slight detune on the coarse tuning and my sub. So it's now this single saw is detuning with the single sub. So this is a sub oscillator, not exactly going to take up anything else in the frequency range and kind of mess with that odd and even kind of like ordering of the harmonics there with the sawtooth, because we don't want it to kind of like take up room of the saw. If we're going for the saw, we want to keep it a saw. So like on a bunch of different synths, you can like capitalize on its actual signal flow in order to like kind of change that up. Whereas direct out here will actually bypass your entire effects chain, and you can add in, other random effects, especially filter effects. My favorite one is the reverb filter. So this is a diffuser. What it does, it's kind of like a comb filter, but every time I change the pitch here, it's going to change the length of all the grains it's chopping out of this. So those grains are comb filtering and feeding back on themselves. So this size amount is not very, very big at all. I would say within 0 milliseconds all the way up at the top to about 22 to 30. And that res is going to give you different amounts of diffusion. So this is super cool for making like really swishy sounds. Swish, swish, swish. So what I like to do when I do really drastic effects like this is I'll go and automate them in with like some type of mix. And then I want something else, kind of move it around with that same movement. Alright, so really basic sound, really basic wavetable, but it definitely kind of like has a little bit of weight to it. I like it. Like what I do to kind of like, for basic processing wise, is I would just kind of like soft clip it, fill it together with some basic curves. Oops. All right, so that is like a couple tricks with that. Again, you want to work with some more interesting wavetables. So if you're going to go and do like a sawtooth bass, maybe you want to go and mess with that saw a little bit. So you can duplicate your wavetables, you know, as many times as you want. You have all your harmonics in here by default. So I can go and like change some of the harmonics here. Definitely want the fundamental to be the loudest. But overall, we want it to just kind of like be a little bit different. So right here, got a little format. So I'm actually pushing the lows a little bit more, making them kind of like a rounded saw. Okay, so now I have these kind of drawn out here. I'm going to morph them, and I'm going to do it spectral. I don't need a zero crossing anything because everything's already lined up. All right, so spectral now. I can morph between that. Alright, so that's kind of interesting. I like this one. This one's weird. I like it because it's weird. But also, it has the basic, like, I guess, quality of a sawtooth. I can hear the sawtooth still inside of it. Again, I'm only using a sine wave on my sub oscillator, so no other sawtooths coming out of here right now. So I want to have that basic sawtooth sound, or whatever starting waveform again. This could be a square wave. You know. So, ton of different ways to go about this. All right, so then once you're done making your little guy, save it. Za za za. I actually have a bunch of different ones of squares that I do. This is my sawtooth go-to. Sawman. Just like some extra aliasing, breakup, all that. I really like to make Reese's with that one. And then, let's see. Okay, so that's a cool sound. Literally just switching it up into a square wave that I've modulated. Huhuab. How do you change the wavetable? Either just click the little pencil, and then you have all your stuff in here, or click this guy, and you got a bunch of different wavetables. I believe I gave out all of these wavetables with my serum section of Synth 101, so go check that. If not, let me know and I will link it all out. The Omnisphere wavetables are really, really good. I really like this. Okay, so, you know, there's a bunch of other things we can do in Serum. New update now. Not going to go through the LFO stuff. Maybe I'll go and do that on a separate day. But, yeah, again, this is one voice. That's kind of the main point about why I even made this a thing. So the saw bass, or the single voice bass, you know, is really, 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 you know, I guess flexible. Chaotic 94, are you asking me if I've tried VCV Rec? Yes, lots of VCV Rec. In fact, you're hearing my voice right now through VCV Rec. There's my voice. Okay, so last couple points to talk about, I guess, because we kind of went through a lot of this stuff already. We talked about all these different super saws. We talked about some of the more kind of like, I guess, bigger sounds as well. Now I want to talk about the last couple sections. And if you've been to any of my other sound design sessions, Reese's and donks are the main attraction. So it's kind of like the vibe. Hence why I even use those slang terms to define them. Because a donk is a stab, a Reese bass is a super saw. That's all they are. I can be like, I'm making super saws that are heavy and today. Boy, you got my mind on cake. Bro, if you cut open Serum, dude, did you know it's cake? Alright, so let's move on to that next sound. Alright, so the Reese bass. So this is something that, you know, again, all the different setups I just showed you are technically Reese basses, but they're not as Reese-y as the other Reese basses. So if anybody knows a little bit about the history of a Reese bass, it's actually from a techno artist. And this is something that I saw somebody in my Discord, I think it was Area 32, shared. But this is something that since I've taught a ton of people techno, this is something I teach them, because it's very, very interesting that it comes from techno, because of the fact that it's dark, it's deep, you can filter it down, you can do a lot of shit with it. You can band pass it and just make it wobble with its detune. That's kind of like the main attraction with it. Res is when you detune saws so that they phase each other in interesting ways. Yes. So the respace is called the respace because of this techno artist, and I believe his name was Reese. So that was the whole point. Hence why we call it the respace and not the Daniel base. Oh, I'm making Daniels today, bro. Like, what if, dude? I would be so bummed if Reese wasn't called Reese. It just sounds like a Reese. All right, so talking about detunes. And we can also do some faceplant too. I can make a couple really quick ones. So we definitely want pitch modulation, pitch bend modulation, going up and down 13. So I'm already done. That was the respace. Did it. So we need at least 2 voices to the duo saw setup. We can add more. I personally like to have, again, 1 center voice, so there is some type of main pitch going on. Bring back the blend, bring up your center voice a little bit more. And then on my second modulator, I can add a little bit of detune and more. Hoover does work. Hoover's also the name of it. For a pulse width modulated super saw. Hoover's like what you call a super square. We can mix that actually. So that's the great thing about the respace is you can go and like pretty much apply any different, you know, vibe to it. So if you're doing like sine compression, you can only use sine waves. So this is really cool with sine compression because it creates a lot of breakup. I'm actually choosing 2 polar opposite sine waves here. Let's do both reverse phase for no reason. And then we'll use, actually I want to stay out of plugins just for now. We've got all that movement here. So if we're in just serum, just stay in serum, and use the actual sinoid fold function here, and this is usable like within 1 to 10%. Anything more than that gets a little too unusable. Also, post filtering, really important for this. So if you go and do this with only 2 voices, it's a little bit more wobbly on 2 sine waves. I like the duo sine waves. Spread out the stereo field, do whatever you want. So let's go back to Sawtooth here. Alright, so we're going to actually saturate this, but we're going to use tube. So tube is going to compress at the same time as saturating. So that's cool for the respace because we want it to like smash it all together and break up and get more complex as it gets smashed. So we can add more detune with torso. I'm gonna add just a little compression. Okay, but I don't have any filtering going on right now, so this is the next step. All right, so we have all these more filters as well as all these other weird filters. So we can do any of these. Band reject is actually a really, really cool one. And then we get another stage of filtering. We have a high pass, low pass, whatever pass on this, EQ, and we can use another filter. So we have 3 filters technically, and we have another filter inside of our tube as well. So we can use any of these filters. All right, so I can get the notch filter, band reject, in my first filter, and then I can go and add, you know, maybe another single notch, or I can go and phase it out. Ooh, we got these new distorted combs as well. Totally forgot about that. So that's nice. Oh, that's so distorted. It's a little too distorted. All right, also I'm going to put this filter post distortion because I want it to like kind of capture some of that, well, just the level of sound that's coming out of it. And also I want to hear the filter a lot more. So actually I'm going to do a multi. So we're going to do a peak notch. So the peak is going to be my cutoff and the frequency is going to be my notch. So I have 3 notches. Make sure it's on, mixed in. Cool. All right, so this is our width right here. Now we can move around both of these guys here. So we want to make sure this is sunk. Starts at the beginning of our... So we want it to kind of gently move over the course of some period of time for the first level of modulation. We can then add rhythmic modulation with another LFO in order to kind of like sync it in time. We can do like level modulation here, and we can also do it's funny. All right, now in the new updated serum, we can actually go and modulate this stuff. So I'm going to modulate LFO1 here. We're going to do that with our LFO2. I'm going to modulate this curve. Let's go and right click. We can do Y on this one. All right, so with these types of LFOs, I actually want some sustain from it. All right, so I have the gentle one kind of moving up and down on this, and then I'm going to have this one modulating these peaks in a pinch fashion. So they're going to go up and down, and have this move down while this goes up. All right, so that sounds cool. A little bit of movement here. Then we got our separate filter. So I'm going to have this. I'm going to just start with my main rhythmic envelope on this one. Again, another pinch. I kind of want it to growl. Oh, hold up. Mods, thank you. That's why we have mods. Oh god, what was that? Alright, so that sounds cool. I like the way it sounds. It's a little bit scooped right now, which is kind of cool. I like that sound on a respace. But now I want to get some more modulation, so we're going to go something that is going to be used a lot in this patch, which is pitch bend, because I like to go up plus a minor second, which is 13. That's going to be used a lot in the modulation. So I want certain crucial pieces to be hooked up to pitch bend in order to kind of work with it a little bit more creatively. So we have all of our cutoffs here are going to be patched into pitch bend. And we're going to get one more on pitch bend to the width. All right, then we have to go into our matrix and then kind of like modulate these. So these are not bipolar right now, so we want to make all of them bipolar. Alright, so nothing should change on this. Everything should sound exactly like this, and that's fine. Because we want to be able to move it from whatever setting it's at. Alright, and then one last thing to make it kind of flip and move around. Space is speeded up with pitch bend, and then we'll go back to our matrix, make sure that's bipolar again. Now maybe even throw it in a space with the pitch bend. So like more wobble, more other stuff going on. Let's actually pull out a little bit more highs. We can cut out some of the lows too. And then we go right click again, mod source, pitch bend. Pitch. And we go bipolar again. This is applicable to all the synths. All right, so that's a basic start. Like, honestly, it's pretty decent. So, also going to shave off some of these bright serum highs. Sick. Alright, so we got also this reverb. I want to accent that a little more, and then patch done. So that's almost ready. So I'm going to actually take that off, and then I'm going to modulate my mix with my LFO. I'm going to right click, aux source. Actually, let's go to our LFO that's on the reverb. We go aux source, and then put that to pitch bend. Bipolar. Alright, so right now the alpha is going so fast when I speed it up with the pitch bend, it actually creates a new tone. All right. So, ton of shit I just showed you. This is going to be an ongoing process. You should sit down and just start making respaces if you want to get really, really, well versed in them. Another couple things that I add onto my respaces pretty habitually is vocoding. I also use compression, a little bit of saturation as well. This is just like basic setup. And we'll talk more again about this when we go into the processing section. So I'm going to set it to modulator mode, pull the range, and push the range all the way up and down. And bring back some of those serum highs now. Now it's kind of like shaving it off. I want to go and add a little bit of erosion because I want to just get that kind of squiggly wateriness to it, which comes from the filter bank. And then I want to add in a little bit more, just a little bit more resolution, as I call it, because it's just adding in some of the high range here without saturating it too hard. And then I'm going to make sure it doesn't clip too hard into the saturator. Just want it to kind of like compress it a little bit. So this would be cool, with the low end shaved off as well, and then you can go and put this into another sub. So this is actually a really good opportunity for me to show you this trick before we move on to stabs and then finally the growls. Stabs, wubs, growls, all kind of in the same family. Typing in sub. Let's just use a basic operator. So I'm going to record enable both so I can trigger them at the same time. But on this one, we're going to drop a gate and then we're going to sidechain it to serum. So I can also go and copy the serum patch and just put in a basic sine wave. But this gives me a little bit more option because then I can also pull off the gate, have sustain, do a bunch of other stuff. Okay, so I want to go and patch into serum 15. That's serum 1. Okay, so now we're getting, whoops. Now we're getting some signal when it goes through. What I like to do is high pass around the mid-range here so I can get a little bit more cleanliness from the lows so it doesn't squish it too hard. Also, gate can be at the end of the chain or in the middle. This is fine-tune a taste here because I'm creating a rhythmic effect with this gate, so you can go and compress the gate and get it to sustain just a little bit more and kind of balance out. Let's go accent this a little bit more so we can hear it. I'm going to push the format. It's going to sound a little weird. So I'm going to go patch this into pre-effects so I can just get straight out of serum wobble. Alright, so I just want to respond to that basic wobble there, and then I can add a little bit of attack, a little bit of release so it's a little bit smoother, doesn't like click or chop with whatever weirdness is happening in the sound. It'll just kind of like gently open and close. That's kind of what I want to make. All right. So that's a bunch of stuff with respaces. Also, how to go and apply a bunch of modulation to this. So when you go and sit down to, do a resampling session for respaces or whatever bass, you should kind of be thinking about a lot of this stuff as well, where it's like, what's your main modulator? What would you record stuff with? And that's pitch bend, and do it with that. If you're going to be using the mod wheel as well, hook up stuff to the mod wheel. Use these like macros. That's how you should be thinking about your extra wheels on your keyboards, because those are the most usable. Left hand can do all that stuff while your right hand can play single notes or whatever. You can also assign the knobs, but a little bit more accessible with that, less programming. That's the whole point. Okay, so now moving on, because there's so many sounds, y'all. There's all of the sounds. I have a lot of sounds. So let's talk about wubs now. So we have face plant right here. I'm gonna just make some wubs. So wubs, and we talked about the melodic supersaw as well. And that was kind of like tuning all those notes together, as well as kind of like changing them in time. We're going to be going over a lot of feature-based sounds in the chord section and leads. So get ready for that. Just kind of like a very applicable thing. Feature-based sounds are not just for feature-based, hence my whole rant about Big Room House. Okay, so donks, wubs, wobbles. Wubs are going to be kind of a blend of either FM sound or wavetable. So wavetable gives you a bunch of options, because wavetable allows you to shift around just straight from the oscillator. So you can go and capture really complex FM sounds and then make them wub straight out the synth. But overall, the kind of like idea of a wub is to kind of center around, using single notes to trigger an envelope. So instead of like a wobble bass where you have an LFO wobbling the bass, literally, this is going to be a single note that you can just play over and over, and kind of have it wub along with whatever you're playing. It's triggering all these things. All right, so I'm going to get a wavetable here. Basic. So you can use anything. I made it very clear that you shouldn't use presets, so that doesn't mean you shouldn't be using wavetables and stuff. And when I say shouldn't use presets, I mean going and crutching yourself on buying preset packs. You should be building your own packs, hence this class. I feel like I have to make myself clear every single time I say that, so nobody gets personally attacked. Okay, so we're going to go modulate the frames, because that's how we modulate wavetable in Serum. And then we're going to make this envelope wub. I'm going to give a little bit of curve. Wubs. So it goes wub, wub. That's what you're looking for. All right, so we got that sound. Now we can go and patch that envelope. So we have here with the frame, let's also patch it into some unison effects. And we'll patch it into the blend, so it sounds a little wider. And then preemptively, I'll create another group so I can put a sub oscillator in it. We got to make sure we route that sub oscillator to an output. Good to go. All right, so we can get the same envelopes going on here, or we can just have this be a sub envelope and then maybe have it with the release. All right, so wub achieved. Really not much else than that. But now we have all this modulation that we can work with, so let's work with it. Okay, so this is a way to go and kind of spread out the sound, get the most out of one wavetable. So I have sub routed here. I can go and patch this to lane 3, which will be kind of my last in line here. And then I can go and patch my other part of the web into lane 2 or lane 1. I can route them parallel as well. So I'm actually going to go and route them parallel. And by doing that, what I'm going to do here, assign another output. Actually going to option drag this. So we're going to 2 places now. We're going to lane 1 and 2. And on lane 2, there's going to be a filter that high passes it or band passes it by default. I already know what I want. And then it's going to go through a reverb. It's going to be like a little send effect. It's going to be 100% wet. Allows me to use the gain on the lane as a way to go and mix it. So now I want to patch lane 1 directly into lane 3, so these are running parallel. And then lane 3 goes directly to the output. I can add compression, whatever. Good one is a limiter. Never hurts. Literally. Alright, so I want to get a little bit of that, and I also want a little bit of distortion. Again, I also have the gain turned down all the way, so I'm going to turn that back up in a second here. Get a little distortion first. Now I'm going to go and assign this to here. So I just know I'm going to want that. Alright, so we have achieved webness. And now I can go and even just do the same thing I'm doing here. I can go and duplicate that out. Spectrosub. I like this. This is one of my favorite wavetables in here. Smample. Super good. I love that one because of the name. Smample. Complex FM. We're going to try that one. Alright, so what I want on this is I'm going to have to mix these in. So I'm going to put this right here. And then I'm going to put a mix so I can control the level. And then I'm going to put a filter so that I can control the frequency range. Cool. Sick. Alright, so now I can do some more effects just on my main channel. Oh. Alright, so I love that. This is the kind of shit that you need to actually do in order to like use reverb on these types of basses. I like reverb on basses. I love it. I'm smitten with it. I also use Valhalla Verb with the kind of, offset on the lows set to pretty high so I can take out most of the lows. You can also try putting the filter at the end of the chain, which is actually another cool effect because now it's going to band pass my reverb. And this is also a very basic wavetable, I guess. It's not exactly basic, but I was looking for this very specific one sound, which was an FM sound. So say if we want to go to something a little bit more basic here, and let's I like it. I want to delete it, but I'll turn it off. All right, so I'm gonna go analog into a sine wave, and then we're gonna go and create a mix group, another group here for our modulators. So we're gonna go group. Remember, you can name these two just so you know what you're looking at. Modulators. Close enough. All right, so this one's gonna be just a modulation. So I can choose anything here. It's not even routed to an output. Don't want it routed to an output. So I'm going to get something a little bit more complex. We're going to go spectral again. Crystal is pretty interesting. Harmonic blend. It's one really, really high frequency stuff. So I'm going to set it to a wonky ratio, like 2 or 4. Fucking kidding me, dude. And then I'm going to route it into the phase modulation. And then I'm going to go and patch auxiliary modulation onto my phase modulator. Now it will build. Then we're going to go patch more movement onto the wavetable that is modulating the wave. I just love the way Faceline sounds. The reverb alone is just amazing. Compared to the reverb of Serum, any reverb is good, including the stock Ableton. The Serum reverb is complete garbage. I say that with the utmost disrespect to Steve Duda himself. I would say it to his face, and I would smile while doing it. Because it's just so bad, and there's so much time to fix it that it's really just ridiculous at this point that it hasn't been. Anyways, so that's a wub. Again, we can go and take this, make it a donk if you want. That's what I'm saying, dude. Steve, you're better than this. I know it, dude. Like, you got the same designer who made Synapse Dune, bro. Like, what are you doing? That shitty reverb. Adds in the hall, calls it a day, says this is good, just as bad. Except now, it's a mono spin reverb. So it's kind of like he added Ableton's reverb into Serum. Alright, so I'm gonna save this. Fuck you. It's a good web name. But I made it a donk right before I saved it. It's all good. Alright, so I'm gonna make a new patch now. Alright, so we're kind of moving from wubs into wobbles. Same exact vibe. And this whole section here, we've been talking about this the whole time. So we're not gonna talk about this after I'm done here. It's gonna be donks and the growls, and then we're done for the night. But this is a long class. Also, start a little late because of my technical issues. Alright, so we're going to go into wobble bases with some basic stuff here. We're going to do analog FM, and then we're going to get a modulator group again. So group here, and then we'll assign this to analog. We'll put another group because we're going to have sub as well. So this one's going to be a wavetable because this will be on modulators. Sub dids, and then we go and add output here, turn this into a sine wave. We can also make it a, regular square, and then low pass it. So this is going to be a couple different waveforms here. I'm going to actually add in a wavetable as well. Alright, so we're going to start by wobbling it. So we're going to make the wobble happen as quick as possible. So there's a couple ways we can do this. We can go and wobble the whole thing. We can wobble just the top bass and then let the sub sustain. Both are, usable. So we're going to want You're gonna want close to that. Set it down to its lowest range, and then set the top value to where you want to go. Okay, so we got a little woof now. We're gonna go into some more interesting sounds here, and whoops. Again, I want this to have like, you know, another stage here. So anything you're gonna go apply effects to inside of the group, make sure it's before other things that are gonna be just kind of stagnant. So this is gonna be stagnant just because it's going to be FM modulated. So right here, we're gonna route a mixer again, and then we can put a filter. So I'm gonna do something a little bit more complex. So I add a little bit more sustain to the low end just so I can hear a little bit more of the weight the whole time because I don't want it to go all the way out. Alright, so that sounds pretty interesting. I'm going to get a triangle wave on this one just because I want it to kind of like be a little bit less exponential on that modulation. And also this is a divisor, so 1/16 is going to be 1/16 really fast. Okay, cool. We're actually going to do a saw. So I'm going to put this on here now, so phase modulation. Alright, so now again we have all of this content to work with. We can do exactly the same setup we just did before. Route it to both lane 1 and 2. As opposed to just one lane, we route it parallel by just adding another output. You can see this chain directly from here feeds both. They both go out. So then we go and route modulation from here. We got that going on. We can also route this modulation into that wavetable, which turns it into a sine wave. So it's not. Cool. All right, so we need the same modulation here. Easiest way to do that is to just copy it over. All right, so I want a comb filter on one layer. So it has a little bit of swish, sounds a little metallic, but doesn't take up the whole space. Alright, so there's a lot of routing that you actually have to do for the comb filter in order to kind of make it a little bit more just load out the website. You know, a little bit more swishy. We can use this chorus effect or just the straight up delay effects. Going to use a delay on this one. Where are you at, boy? Cool. Alright, so now we're going to filter that up. Actually going to do a couple filters. So we're going to do high pass here, and then we're going to make it kind of like move around a little bit. So I'm going to do high pass, and we're going to do a peak filter. I just gotta make sure this is right to master. Cool. So that's loud. I'm gonna limit that a little bit. And then we're going to modulate this a little bit differently. So we're going to kind of have the same thing going on here, but this is going to now be kind of counter to this. So it's going to be slower. So where this is 16th, I'll like this as a quarter note or a bar, where it's set to kind of like a bar right now. Okay, so we're going to change up this waveform now. This is actually going to be drawn. So I'm going to draw in some kind of like a square wave a little bit. Alright, so now it's two states. It moves from ooh ooh, went woo woo. So now I can dial in where I want that range to kind of like set in. Alright, so now we're kind of making talking growls. So I've shown you like actually 4 or 5 different versions of a growl bass already. But yeah, ton of stuff to try out here. So I'm gonna compress this main section here, and then we're gonna also send our sub into a distortion. I want it to be a little bit harder. And then we're going to send it to lane 3. Alright, so then all this is going to be sent into compression, limiting. I'm actually going to run it through a distortion, but I also want a little bit of transient shaping. I want to pump it a little bit and get the sustain. And then I also want a little bit more swish, but I want less of the cone filter swish, so I'm going to add a little bit of reverb. It's going to be very, very short, so it's going to be a small size, more early reflections, less width. Pull back. Good question, Iconic. So when you know a sound is done is when you're done with it. When you hear a sound you like while designing, save it. Like this is the Schwunker. Schwunker 1. Fuck it. So when you name it 1, that gives you, the option to go to number 2. So you just like every time you go and modulate the patch and it becomes something cool, maybe add another modulator, do something different with the oscillators, whatever. Save a new patch, get to the right spot. the way this sounds right here, that small movement, just a little touch of it would be Alright, so we're going to leave it up. Then we're going to add mix modulation from our main wobbler. So this is the wobble right here. It's where all the wobble happens, man. And we got other modulators and other parts of the sound that we still have not fucked with yet. So there's so many different things we can do. Oh, that's fucking nice. Okay. Alrighty. So, I didn't even save Schwunker 2. What a bummer. So we talked about dunks a little bit, but we're going to talk the last couple minutes, I guess, about our couple pieces here are going to be about dunks and growls. So the growls we're going to do in Serum, because Serum is actually a very good growl-based designer. So is Faceplant here, but let's do the dunks. So we're going to do 2 square waves. So a dunk bass can be this by default. You don't have to do much more than this, actually. This is a perfectly designed night bass dunk. And I mean that with the utmost disrespect. Okay, so that's done. Don't have to do anything more to that. Cut, print, sell it. Alright, so one thing I like doing with this type of sound is sync modulation. So I'll go and pretty much map my envelope to the sync modulator. Essentially, this is a donk bass, as long as it stabs and has bass. And then I also like to modulate my main carrier with Alright, cool. So that's kind of weird.